There it was, my siblings, every brother and sister I had ever met and never knew about listed, along with different social security numbers, names, birth dates, businesses. It was all there, the many lives of Mr. H. This was the moment where my relationship with my mom would begin its official crumbling into non existence and my odd, painful relief. My mother was demanding, mean, and controlling, and often defended my father's abuse or aloofness of my being with the fact that I didn't have humor or was too sensitive. In perspective, I realized she didn't mind that he didn't want me around because in some ways she didn't either. Yet the real kicker was how much my father provided for those other kids that he too abandoned in some ways, including getting them homes. He got them houses, I said. Did he pay for their school? I was shocked. My father had stolen money from me and put me in debt when he claimed he would pay for my university and backed out of payments once I arrived. It was an absolute cruelty that he had planned, and yet with these kids, he had never even had the thought. We always had each other. That is what matters, said the woman that always predicted we would eventually not speak. That's not the point, I yelped. I looked at pictures of my siblings with their moms, children, and husbands, along with titles and jobs, while I still swam in the freelance pool. They were stable and anchored, in part because their mothers made sure my father, even if he was going to leave, it was going to be leaving the paycheck. While my mother battled internally with the struggle, most of the women in her family had, even if married, they had to work to provide for their kids, which meant all they ever owned was shared, and they did not want to. Naturally, my mother wanted to live like my dad, with no loyalty, mercy, or even afterthoughts for me. Yet what she did not see is that she did. She just did not get a house for it, like he gave the others. Her attempt to appear strong and easygoing about the uneasiness he caused her affected me, and it did not matter. The whole time he was getting married to others, while my mother was pretending they were still happily married. You always think I'm a bad person, she replied, scrunching her face as if to cry without tears. You're not the victim this time, I said. Every time he plotted against me, made fun of me, abused me over money, you defended him and called me sensitive. And he literally was building families across the U.S. and getting it from the back, always paying for everyone and making me pay. I launched into blubbering tears, my nose filled with snot from the amount of guttural pain screeching from my body, from my heart. You made me his discount! And you're not even sorry? I hung up the phone in what would be one of our final conversations. I had lost hope that my mother would ever apologize, would ever see the wrongdoing she committed against me. Instead, she preferred to still villainize me, something my father understood was his biggest asset in turning against me as well. All right, let's heal, let's discuss. So I got all this information on my father, including the men he was dating, the women. I got everything. And I passed it to my mother, and she did nothing with it and just said, you know what? At least we had each other. And I thought, I'm leaving this gray garden. I'm leaving this gray garden. I'm not going to be wearing pantyhose in my head, waving an American flag and singing, send my regards to daddy. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be 55 years old with my haggard mother losing hair in her bed yelling at me that I don't know how to sweep. I'm not going to live that gray garden. And I think it's something that I've said in a prior episode. It's kind of like gray gardening. When you are in a relationship where somebody just totally projects onto you, they only remember your reactions. They never remember their actions. They only see you as somebody who either makes them a hero or makes them a victim, but you don't have any identity or autonomy over yourself unless you leave them. And I think my entire life, I don't think, I know, my entire life, my father always humiliated me, mistreated me, dragged me through the mud, And I would come crying to my mother, and all he had to say was, "She's so sensitive, right?" And my mother would be like, "She misinterprets everything." And I didn't see until now she was in love with him. She loved him more than me. And she just painted it as, I'm protecting you by bashing you in front of him. Like when you say it out loud, you're like, this is the crack epidemic. This is the crack epidemic. Like this is just a whole lot of crack everywhere. Like it just didn't make sense until I reached this point now where I'm saying things out loud. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Because one of the things that I realized, my mother, every time I confronted my mother on how she treated everybody better than me, she would get this smirk. "Oh, you're so jealous. You just want more of my love." And it's like, no, you hit me and you scold me and you yell at me and you call me a big fat idiot, and then we go in public and you tap dance on how you love me, and you become the wisest, most helpful person to everybody just to privately say you feel dry. And it was this roller coaster dynamic. And I didn't realize I would get so mad at my dad I would get mad at my mother for siding with my father against me. And I would get mad at my dad for making her side against me, not realizing not only that they were both wrong, but that they both didn't care about me. They cared more about their relationship. And I was almost like a broken bridge, keeping these two people connected to each other. And when I saw how much my father provided for his other children, because my father made it seem that he only had two wives and he was just so in love with them, he had to marry both. He couldn't divorce his second wife, who was the one who stalked us, because she was terrifying and would put him to jail, and she was so mean. And mind you, he had another wife before her. Like there was an order here. And I think when I look back at my father's ability to be absolutely detestable towards me and verbally and psychologically assault me, I think my father understood if he played nice with my mother and made her think that he was so impressed by how forgiving she was and how she could still handle him around despite this life-ruining betrayal. If he played nice to her image and her ego, he could put all the hatred he had against her in me. Because my father hated that my mother caught him, not only because it ruined their relationship, because remember, the narcissist sees himself as the hero or as the martyr, never as the villain. It was not only that she ruined the relationship by snooping around, but she also sabotaged his second marriage. And it took him years to stabilize that instability. Mind you, he had about three others, and two of them were upcoming. And my mother, my mother was obsessed with looking like she was a saint to her enemies. You know, she would give water to the person who threw hot water in her face. Like she just liked to look unbothered. But the minute that home door closed, it was volcanoes and targeting me. And my father understood that. Because my father, the thing about narcissists is that they do pick up patterns. They pick up your dark patterns. They noticed, as much as you notice their potential for light, they notice your potential for darkness. And that's why it's a toxic relationship, because they're going to bring out your darkness. You're never going to bring out their light. And I was so mad when I found out, because my family, my mother always made money a symbol of love. How can you say I hate you when I gave you a roof? How could you say I'm mean to you and that I say you're horrible when I feed you? Money was love. And my father was similar in that way. So the fact that he stole from me, that he plotted me to go into student debt, meant he hated me. And my mother did this weird triangulation where it was like, he can't hate you because he loved me and I loved him, and you are a product of that love. And it was just delusion to the maximus. And I was crying because I was seeing the list of my siblings, and a lot of them, they were successful in business, are living, their best lives, traveling. They were successful. They had like families, especially my sisters. And I was still floating in some ways. And don't get me wrong, I like to float, but I have struggled to anchor. I have struggled to commit. And it's because my mother was great gardening me. Like my mother, every time I was sad, it was, how could you be sad? You had me. Every time I struggled, don't worry, you have me. But if she helped me, she would hold it over my head like a debt that I could never pay off. It would never be, there was nothing I could do to pay off that one time she helped me. Meanwhile, she was helping everyone for free. And I was so angry because my mother, a lot of times my mother was always criticizing other mothers and like pain. And I would be like, yeah, like, I don't even know what I was agreeing to. I would just like listen and be like, whoa, really? Uh-huh. Like always gossiping and criticizing other people's parenting, including the second wife, because she was stalking us and she could be so cruel towards us. And I think for my mother, she couldn't imagine somebody who was so malicious towards this woman who was another victim to their mutual husband being a kind mom. And in her head, she was like, this woman who's villainizing us, being a villain towards us, must be raising little baby villains, because my older sister had written all these like angry letters to my aunts. How could you like that woman? Okay, my mom. She's horrible. Like just saying all these talking points that her parents had given her without ever really knowing my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. Like so much of my childhood was just me emotionally and mentally supporting my parents so that they would praise me. And usually that praise came in public, which is why, again, I liked PR relationships for so long. But my father financially provided for these kids, and their mothers made sure he did. And my mother was fine with the fact that he didn't provide for me, fine with the fact that he degraded me. And even though she says she didn't like it, she never stopped it. And she joined in. She encouraged. And this was this moment of kind of like, I was seeing whether or not they were good women in the sense of they had a healthy relationship with my dad as husband and wife. They were good moms. They made sure their kids got pieces of the pie or had enough emotional and mental encouragement from them to be successful. And my mother made fun of me a lot. And my father did too. And it did take a toll on me in terms of how I materialize, in terms of how confident I feel. And I was confronting my mom, and once again, she played victim. And she said, you always think I'm a bad person. You think I'm bad. And she was trying to cry, but she couldn't. And we were back into that same conversation where my mother would absolutely humiliate me And I would fight for her to see it, and she would just play victim. But this time I couldn't stay in that pattern because I had a literal 100-page document that proved I was right. My father could be a good father if he had a good mother to demand him to be. And I hung up the phone, and it was one of the final conversations I had with my mother. Because, like I said, she made me the discount. He didn't, that's one less kid he had to pay for. And I've been discounting my ass ever since. So check out Daddy Recovery, the podcast. Check out all the platforms. Check out Hardin on all music platforms. Love ya.